This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hey, Bruchim Haba, and welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. We want to welcome all of our Torah Anytime viewers. Parshas Vayechi. Vayechi is the last Parsha on Savarabihood, and it speaks about the Petira of Yaakov Avinu. Even though Yaakov Avinu, the Torah tells us that he passes away, and yet the Gemara says Yaakov Avinu lo meis, which itself is a very complex topic. And after, of course, Yosef and the brothers bury Yaakov Avinu, so they return to Mitzrayim, and in my opinion we have one of the most difficult psukim in the entire Chumash. A very difficult pasuk. The pasuk says the following: Vayashav Yosef Mitzrayim. Yosef returns to Mitzrayim. Hu v'Yaakov, him and his brothers. V'chol ha'olam itai, and everyone who went out with him. Likbar esaviv, to bury their father. Acharei kavrei esaviv, after he buried his father. No kidding, after he buried his father. You can't come back from burying your father before you bury your father. I mean, what does the pasuk mean? They returned from burying their father after they buried their father. I mean, obviously, right? You can't return from doing something before you accomplish it. I mean, it's the same words repeat themselves again and again. Likbar esaviv, acharei kavrei esaviv. Very difficult problem. Very difficult problem. Here we have another difficulty. Look in number 2. This is in Parak Nun, Pasuk Hey. And Yosef tells Paro, Paro, you have to let me go and bury my father in the land of Canaan. Look what he says. He says, Avi hishbiani lemar, my father made me swear, saying, Hine anochi meis, behold, I'm dying, bekivri, asher karisi li be'eretz Canaan, in the kever, in the grave, that I, karisi li, shama tikbareni, that's where you should bury me. What do the words mean, asher karisi li? So Rashi says, Asher karisili kipshutai, like it means, kamaiki yichra ish, like a man digs. In other words, Yaakov Avinu says, you know where you should bury me? In the grave that I dug. In other words, Yaakov is saying that he himself dug his own grave. Now, when did Yaakov dig the grave? Not moments before he passed away, obviously not. Yaakov Avinu passes away in Egypt. He's not buried, he's buried in the Mars HaMachpelah. He's buried in Mitzrayim, buried in Eretz Yisrael. And yet the Torah is saying, Yaakov dug his own grave. Okay, so you hear that, it sounds a little strange. But it's more than a little strange. You're not allowed to dig your own grave. Who says you're not allowed to dig your own grave? So we have something called the Tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid was one of the early Rishonim. He was born in Speyer in Germany in the year 1150. And he had an ancient Kabbalistic tradition about the precise meaning of the tefillos and how many words each tefillah has to have. And Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wrote an ethical will. And there's a lot of discussion in Jewish literature as to whether we are bound to fulfill and to keep the ethical will of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. I'll give you some examples of what it says in Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid's ethical will. He says, don't marry a woman who has the same name as your mother. Right? And there are people who get very nervous about, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. That is one of the things Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid will say, don't shave on Rosh Chodesh. That's also, in...
Isn't it true for a man? A woman shouldn't marry a man?
Yeah. He specifically talks about a mother-in-law. Now the second thing I said, in yeshiva they always said, better not to actually shave on Rosh Chodesh. But these all come from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. And people get very scared when they hear, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid said not to do it. Something that people know you're not allowed to do, let's say stealing. So, people, steal, no steal. But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, anytime it's like some kind of spiritual, mystical thing, people get very nervous about it, right? They say it would have been good if Leisigza was in the Tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. But in any case, one of the things Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid tells us, and not only one of them, the second thing in his sefer is, don't dig your own grave. Can you imagine that? Of all the dozens of things in the Tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, the second thing he writes is, don't dig your own grave. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. He writes, look at number 4, Ein lachtzov kever ulhaniach pasuach. Don't dig a grave and leave it open. Unless you're putting in the body on that day. If you leave it open throughout the night until the morning, he guarantees someone in the city will die. So Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is saying, don't dig a grave before you put in the dead body. And here, Yaakov Avinu is saying, where should you bury me? In the spot that I dug.
They're also like people buying a grave. Not the same thing?
Yeah, you buy a grave, but it's not dug yet. You buy the spot, and then when the person passes away, they dig it then. But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is saying, you're not to leave a grave open. So you say, okay, it's only the tzava, it's only the ethical will of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Did Yaakov Avinu have to keep the ethical will? Especially if you say the ethical will of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is only for his descendants. Yaakov Avinu was not a descendant of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. The problem is that the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch brings this down lahalacha that one may not dig a grave and leave it open. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Look at number 5. The Ramah writes on the second line, Asur lachtzov shum kever liyos pasuach ad lemachar. It is prohibited to leave a grave open till the next day. Shelo yikbaru ba'ames, if you're not going to bury. And then the Ramah adds, for good measure, v'yesh sakana b'davar. To guarantee no one's going to dare do such a thing. The Ramah writes, if you do it, it's dangerous. He doesn't just mean because someone might fall into it. Mystically, Kabbalistically, it's very dangerous to dig a grave and leave it open. So what's Yaakov Avinu saying? Bury me in the grave that he dug. He was not authorized to dig a grave. Okay. So we're going to feature a Maramakom that I don't believe we featured yet in the Wednesday night shiur, and that is Shailas Teshuvas Minchas Elazar from the Munkatcher Rebbe. And right? If you want to know who he is, you can watch him on YouTube. There's a famous video of the Munkatcher Rebbe, right? Warning the Jews in America to keep Shabbos. Yeah, that's what they say. Anyway, the Minchas Elazar says like this. The Minchas Elazar says, how, he asks, look at number 6. This is in Chelek Gimel, Siman Yud Gimel. He wants to know, how is Yaakov Avinu allowed to dig his own grave? What about the Yitzavah of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid? So the Minchas Elazar says, you know what you learned from here? Yaakov Avinu wasn't concerned with the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. It's not binding. The tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is not binding on everyone. It's not an absolute obligation to follow the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. First worry about the Chumash, then worry about the Gemara and the Mishnah Brura. When you're done with that, then you could think about Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, right? When you stop speaking Lashon Hara, then you worry about the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. But then the Minchas Elazar says a very interesting possibility, how Yaakov Avinu was not violating the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Listen to this. He says, where was Yaakov Avinu buried? In Israel. Where did Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid live? Germany. There is a major difference in halacha between the land of Israel and Germany. In Eretz Yisrael, if somebody dies, someone passes away, they bury them on that very day. What if the relatives aren't there yet? Too bad. What if, somebody has to come in from overseas and they want to be there? Too bad. Laisalin Nivlasai Alav Minhag Yerushalayim is the day the person passes away, they bury that day, they may even bury at night. What if it's for the honor of the mace to postpone the Kvura? Too bad. They bury on that very day. And therefore, says the Minchas Elazar, in Eretz Yisrael, where they have to bury on that day, so if they don't prepare the grave in advance, they're not going to be able to bury on that day. Plus, in Eretz Yisrael, it's very hot. And if you leave the body longer than necessary, the body may rot. And plus, in Eretz Yisrael, it's rocky terrain. Right? Like Hebron. Hebron is mountainous, it's rocky terrain. And therefore, if they don't prepare the grave in advance, you're not going to be able to expedite the burial. So because of all of these reasons, in Eretz Yisrael, because you're involved in fulfilling the mitzvah of kevura, of burial, they are allowed to ignore the danger of leaving a grave open. Why? Why are they allowed to ignore the danger of leaving the grave open? Because since they're involved in a mitzvah, what's the mitzvah? Burial? There's a concept, shomer mitzvah lo yada davara. If you're involved in a mitzvah, you don't have to worry about Kabbalistic and supernatural dangers. You're involved in something so much more important. You don't have to worry about these mystical dangers. And therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, you are permitted, says the Minchas Elazar, to dig a grave and leave it open. But in Germany, or anywhere outside of Yerushalayim, where they very often don't bury on the same day. If Great Aunt Tilda isn't there, they'll postpone it to the next day, right? If the second cousin wants to be there, they postpone it because of Kavanah Meis. So if anyway in Chutz La'aretz, and plus the ground is very soft in Chutz La'aretz, and plus it's cold. So because of all these factors, says the Minchas Elazar, you may postpone the burial till the next day, and therefore it's not necessary to dig the grave. And if you dig the grave and you leave it open, it's very dangerous, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid was talking about.
In the Midbar, didn't the people end up digging their own graves?
Good.
Only about 2.5% of the people died.
So there they dug their own grave, but we're going to see, if you're going in on that day, so then you're okay. The problem is digging the grave and leaving it open. So that's the problem we're getting around. How was Yaakov Avinu allowed to dig his own grave? The answer is, it was in Israel, it was hot, it was rocky, they had to bury on that day. Because of all these factors, they were able to ignore the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. But
17 years before.
Yeah,
it wasn't that day.
Yeah, you never know. Right? You never know. That's okay.
Did it take from Israel to get to the Israel, the body?
Wasn't there. I don't know.
No, it doesn't say anywhere.
I don't think so. I'm not familiar. So what we're going to explore this evening is a most masterful explanation how Yaakov Avinu was permitted to dig his own grave, and he was not in violation of this tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Okay. When you're sitting around the table, right? You're invited, you have some friends to say Divrei Torah or to have some refreshments, and there are two people at the table. Yeah? How do you situate the seating arrangements? Okay, so you say, well, we have to first determine who is the greater of the two. Okay, so let's say we say we have Ruvain and Shimon. Ruvain is the greater one. Where should Ruvain sit? Where should Shimon sit?
Head of the table.
So the Yerushalmi says Ruvain sits on the right side, Shimon sits on the left side. Okay? What if you have three people at the table? How do you make the seating arrangements? How do you make the seating arrangements? You have three people at the table. The Gadol is in the middle. The next Chashav is on the right side. And the next one is on the left side. Okay? So if you have two people, the most Chashav one on the right, the next one on the left. If you have three people, the Chashav one in the middle, the next one on the right, the other one on the left side. Fine. Says the Yerushalmi, Masechta Tainis Parak Dalet, how did they bury the Avos? Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. How did they bury the Avos? Says the Gemara, the Yerushalmi says, Amar Rab Shmuel bar Rab Yitzchak, Avos derech hasev hein kavurin. The Avos are buried the way you sit around the table. The same way you sit around the table. Reuven and Shimon, Reuven on the right side. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, if let's say Reuven is the greater one, Reuven in the middle, Shimon on the right side, Levi on the left side. Says the Gemara, the Avos are buried the way you sit around the table. Says the Rogatchover, you ready for this? Yeah, if you walk out tonight and somebody asks, you have a good Rogatchover to stay over? So this is what you tell them. Says the Rogatchover, so think about it. Abraham was buried, they put him in the ground. Then Yitzchak passes away. On what side do they put Yitzchak? On the right side or on the left side? On the left side. Avram's the father, Yitzchak's the son. Avram gets the right side, Yitzchak gets the left side. Comes Yaakov Avinu passes away. Where are they going to put Yaakov? On the right side? You can't put Abraham in the middle, Yaakov, the grandson, on the right side, and Yitzchak, the son, on the left side. So says the Rogatchover, what do they have to do? They had to disinter Yitzchak, take him from the left side, put him on the right side, and put Yaakov on the left side. You got this? I know it's a very exciting topic, but that's what we're talking about tonight. Yeah? Abraham and Yitzchak, how did they do it? They put Abraham on the right, Yitzchak on the left. And then when Yaakov passes away, they have to remove Yitzchak, Put Yitzchak on the right side, put Yaakov on the left side. Says the rugged shaver. Now the pasuk reads like a glove. Listen to this. Look at number 1. Vayashav Yosef Mitzrayma. Yosef returns to Mitzrayim. Who? Him, Yaakov and his brothers. V'chol ha'olam itai. Likbar Aviv. After they buried their father Yaakov. And when did that occur? Acharei kavrei Aviv. After they buried his father Yitzchak. You hear that? That's how the rugged shaver. That's the simple explanation of the pasuk. V'chol ha'olam itai likbar Aviv, to bury Yaakov. Acharei kavrei Aviv, after they buried not Yaakov, the father of Yaakov, Yitzchak. That's how the rugged shaver reads the pasuk. Comes along a Talmud Chacham by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Denderovitz. Okay, and he says the following. So now we have a beautiful answer. How Yaakov did not violate the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Because when did Yaakov dig his own grave? One day he woke up in the morning and he decided to dig a grave for himself? No. He dug a grave for Yitzchak. That he knew that ultimately he would be in that grave one day. So what happened was Abraham passes away, they bury him. Then Yaakov digs a grave to the left side of Abraham. That they didn't leave open even for one moment. You know who they put in that grave immediately? Yitzchak. And then when Yaakov passes away, right before he passes away, he says, bury me in the grave that I dug for myself. So we asked, what do you mean he dug for himself? He wasn't allowed to dig a grave and leave it open. The answer is he didn't leave it open. Yitzchak had occupied that grave from the moment it was dug until Yaakov is brought to that spot. They disinter Yitzchak. They put Yitzchak on the right side. Yaakov goes into the grave that he dug, and according to this, Yaakov Avinu was never in violation of the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. So in case you were wondering, did Yaakov violate the tzava of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid? The answer is a resounding no. Okay. Let us move on. That is one explanation for the pasuk that Yaakov says, bury me in the grave asher karisi li, that I dug for myself. Rashi brings another explanation. Rashi, if you take a look in number 12, Rashi brings down, you know what karisi means? Lashon keri dagor. It means a pile. Says Rashi, Yaakov Avinu took all the silver and all the gold that he acquired in Lavan's house. He piled it in front of Esav, and he says, Esav, I will give you all of my money for the shiur in the Me'aras HaMachpelah. Now let's think about that for a moment. We know who was technically the firstborn? Esav. Yaakov bought the firstborn from Esav. Yaakov took the brachos from Esav. But the Me'aras HaMachpelah, technically speaking, who owned the Me'aras HaMachpelah? 2/3 to Esav, 1/3 to Yaakov, right? Esav was the firstborn, he gets double portion. 2/3 to Esav, Yaakov has 1/3. He goes over to Esav, he says, all my money that I acquired in Lavan's house, it's all yours for your share in Me'aras HaMachpelah. So the Sefer Be'er Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Salant, asks a very obvious question. He wants to know, why? I mean, this is not good business practice, right? You want to buy something off someone. Right? You start low. You say, I'll give you 50 cents for it. Oh, the guy said, no. I'll give you $5. You don't say to a guy, oh, you're selling it? Here's $50 million. Right? You don't work your way down when you're trying to buy something. You work your way up. So why would Yaakov go to Esav? Here's all my money in the that I made in Lavan's house from Me'aras HaMachpelah. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's not like Esav had a major asking price. Remember when Yaakov bought the birthright? How much money did he offer? A bowl of beans. So now, Yaakov offered beans the first time. You should say, Esav, here's a piece of kishka. Give me the Me'aras HaMachpelah. Right? What's he offering all his money for? Esav wasn't asking for a lot of money. He probably could have gotten away with a lot less than all of his money. So the Be'er Yosef says a very beautiful pshat. The Be'er Yosef says that remember when Yaakov was returning from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, Vayira Yaakov Ma'od Vayechi. He was very afraid. Yaakov Avinu was very afraid. What was Yaakov so scared of? So the Medrash tells us Yaakov was afraid of two zechusim that Esav had. What were they? The mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. For 22 years, Esav was living in the land of Israel. Yaakov wasn't. And the other mitzvah was Kibbud Avim. Esav was serving his father for 22 years. Yaakov wasn't. Because Esav had these two mitzvahs and Yaakov did not, Yaakov was very afraid. So Yaakov says, I have a great trick to sort of strip Esav of these two zechusim. I'm going to go over to Esav, and I'm going to see how much does he really love Eretz Yisrael? How much does he really worried about honoring his parents? Because he has an opportunity to remain in the land of Israel forever, next to his parents. And I'm going to demonstrate to Hashem that I would offer all of my money to be able to honor my parents by being buried next to them in the land of Israel. And this bum Esav is willing to give it all up for some money. So Yaakov Avinu, says about Yosef, offers all of his money that he acquired in Lavan's house for the right to honor his parents by being buried next to them and to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, to show the Rebbeinu Shalom that after all, Esav is not such a great proponent of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and the mitzvah of Kibbud Avim.
So isn't Esav the paradigm of Kibbud Avim?
Yeah, up to a point. Up to a point. Yeah. The hakesef yanes hakol. Okay. Now here comes the fun part. Okay, you ready? If I ask you who is buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, so we say, it's called Kiryas Arba. You have four pairs. You have Adam and Chava, Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. Anybody else? Everybody knows, right? From the time you're 3 years old, right? Even before you know Moidani, you know that Esav's head is buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah.
Where's the rest of his body?
Good question.
Don't even ask that.
That's what we're here to discover. Where is the rest of Esav? And is his head really in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah? Come on, his head? Where does that come from? Right, so, first of all, there's an amazing Vilna Gaon in Parshas Chayesara. It says in Parshas Chayesara 7 times, it says like this: Ekbara Mesi, Kivar Mesecha, Mi Kivar Mesecha, Likbaras Mesi, Kivar Mesecha, Ekbaras Mesi, Vies Mesecha Kivar. It says 7 times to bury the dead. Now, anybody who knows a little Hebrew would understand immediately that we could get by that whole Parsha with saying the words, bury the dead, maybe 1 or 2 times. We don't have to keep on repeating, bury the dead, bury the dead. We get the point. We know what we do with the dead already. You bury them. And the Torah reiterates, bury the dead, bury the dead, bury the dead. And the last time it says, the dead bury. So the Vilna Gaon wants to know why 6 times it says, bury the dead, and a 7th time it says, the dead bury. So the Gemara says like this: we know tzaddikim, even when they're dead, it's like they're alive. Okay? It's like they're alive. Yeah? Okay. Not they're actually alive. It's like they're alive. But the Rishaim, the wicked, even when they're alive, it's like they're dead. So the Gemara asks, if tzaddikim are considered like they're alive even when they're dead, then what do they need tchias hamesim for? Why does Hashem have to revive someone who's already alive? Says the Gemara, 1 moment before Tchias HaMesim, the tzaddikim will die, so Hashem could revive them. It's the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, Kuf Nun Beis, right? You're almost there in the Daf Yomi. Kuf Nun Beis. So the Gemara says, tzaddikim will die 1 moment before Tchias HaMesim, so Hashem could revive them. So it comes out like this: Rishayim, first they die, right? They're dead their whole life, and then they're buried. Tzaddikim, first they're buried, and then they die. Because they're always alive until the moment of the revival of the dead. So the Gra says, we have 6 people who needed to be buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Abraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah. Kivar, Mesecha, Kivar, Mesecha, Kivar, Mesecha, Kvar Mesecha, Kvar Mesecha, Kvar Mesecha. Bury the dead. Because these are tzaddikim. First they're buried, and then they die. But you have one individual who's a Rasha, and he's dead even before he's buried, and that's Esav. And the Gra makes reference to Esav's head, and that's why it says the 7th time, Mesecha Kivar. That's the.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.